Okay, I've tried to do this like 8 times, and either I dropped the phone or I've gotten phone calls and interrupted it, and I don't know how to add videos together yet. I don't have video editing software so I could just keep going and then splice the two videos together or whatever. So I'm doing this all over again, and needless to say, I'm kind of frustrated. So forgive me if I seem like I'm rushing through this or whatever. It's just I want to get this out. I've tried like 8 times, and this is it. If I don't do it this time, I guess I don't make a video. But I haven't made a knitting video in a long time, and I want to do one. I want to start getting in the habit of doing one at least once a month, if not more. Even though I'm not like a real big expert or anything, but I think maybe somebody might be interested. I don't know. Anyway, I rediscovered how to do a tubular bind-on, or cast-on rather, not bind-on, cast-on for 2x2 rib. I used there's something that's comparable for binding off, but I'm not as good as it. When I tried it, it looked stupid, so I just went with the 1x1 and bound off. Tubular, by the way, these are done flat, back and forth, and mattress stitched together. But it makes a really nice edge, I think. So that's what I'm going to go through. Did I already say that I put up the webcam? I said that so many times in my other attempts at this video, so forgive me if I've already said it this video, but I'm putting up the webcam. I don't think it's better than the phone, even though I can be interrupted by the phone. I haven't discovered this is a boost phone, by the way. I don't mind a boost. I haven't had any big problems with them, although I understand others have, but I don't see any way to just turn off phone calls. Actually, I do know a way to turn off phone calls. I just didn't do it, and I've been interrupted twice. So I guess next time I'll just have to remember what I need to do. But it's a little more complicated sometimes with these prepaid phones, and not all the, abilities of the phone are turned on or whatever. Okay. Well, I'm going to try again to show you what I did. And I start off, I'm going to have a selvage stitch on both sides since I'm going to knit this flat. And all I do here when I do this is I make a slip stitch. I don't know if I'm supposed to. Maybe it's a no-no. But the thing is, it works for me. And it helps stabilize it. So now I'm going to make my selvage stitch, which is that slip stitch. And then I'm going to, I want to make sure when I finally get into the 2x2 rib, I start with 2 knit stitches and end with 2 purls. And that's the way I'm going to count. It's not going to make any sense to you. But believe me, there's a method for my madness. And if you want to see in more detail the tubular cast-on that I'm doing, also I've seen it called a Kitchener cast-on. You can Google Kitchener cast-on or tubular cast-on. I think it's called either an Italian or German cast-on. Your fingers fly with this thing, and it takes like 2 seconds to cast on a whole bunch of stitches. So I'm not going to go deeply into it, but just Google Kitchener or tubular cast-on and you'll see it. But I'm going to want 2 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches, 2 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches, 2 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches. Basically, I'm just counting stitches now, even though it's a knit purl, just like I said, go with it. 2 knit stitches, 2 purl stitches. And then I'm going to do another selvage stitch, and what I do is a kind of a, I don't know what you call that, slip stitch, half hitch, whatever you call it. I'm stabilizing it again. Again, I don't know if I'm supposed to do that, but for me, it seems to work. So now I'm going to purl the selvage stitches, always purl, and actually purling them, not just slipping them. Next, I'm going to knit the knit stitches and slip the purl stitches with the yarn in front. And if you've done a tubular cast on, you know why this is done. And if you double knit, you'll recognize this because you keep going with this and you wind up making a reversible fabric. But that's not what I'm going to do. But when I think about this, well, I'll do a more in-depth thing about what it means to be knitting the knit stitches and slipping the purl stitches when you're knitting flat like this in another video, but this is just for this cast on. So slipping and then knitting the knit stitch and then purling the purl stitch, knitting and purling, and then slipping the purl stitch with the yarn in front, and then purling the selvage stitch. And you could do anything you want, however you want to work the selvage stitches. Just for this sample, I'm going to purl them each time. Purl, purl, purl the selvage stitches. So that was one row of knitting the knit stitches and slipping the purl stitches. Now I'm knitting the knit stitch and slipping the purl stitch with the yarn in front. And if you think about it, what are you doing? You're working the stitch that you slipped on the previous row. And you're slipping the stitch that you knit on the previous row. Okay? So knit the knit stitch, which was the purl stitch on the other side, and slip the purl stitch, which was the knit stitch on the other side. This, you'll see what this does to your stitches. Slip and knit and slip and and purl, because that's the last one. Now you're going to do this for 2 more rows. You're going to do this for a total of 4 rows. Really, if you think about it, you're only doing 2 rows. Purl this one. Selvage stitch. Because on each little individual pass, you're only knitting half the stitches. So say knit, slip, knit, slip. You're only knitting half the stitches. So on the first go round, your first pass, you're knitting half the row. And on the second pass, you're knitting the other half of the row. So you've knit an entire row once you've gone that way and back again. So you're going to do this for a total of 4 rows till you're back where you started. Okay. Almost done. To the point where we can do the little magical thing. Okay, this is normal, although sometimes if I'm going to do just a 1-by-1 rib, I just do it for 2 rows and then keep going. Although I've seen it in instructions to do it for like 4, maybe even more rows. And the selvage looks kind of bulky or whatever. I don't know. All I know is that I like a purled selvage a lot of times. Let's see, flip it, knit. I like a purled selvage. I like a chain stitch selvage. This is just an example that I'm using on this particular practice piece. Okay, slip and then knit. In this particular, purl rather, purling the silver stitches. Okay, so this is the magic. Purl the selvage stitch. Now knit the first stitch and then go into the second stitch from the needle that right now. In other words, you've got a knit stitch that you've just knit. you've got a purl stitch waiting, and then you've got another knit stitch. You're going to go into that knit stitch, okay, and knit it like normal, but you can't pass it off the needle because you've still got that purl stitch waiting. And then you bring the yarn in front and you purl that next purl stitch. Okay. And then you purl, and then you knit. And then you're back to where you started from, because you want a 2 by 2, right? So you're looking for this next knit stitch. That purl stitches, that dumb purl stitch is in the way. You don't want it there, so you knit the knit stitch without dropping it off the needle. Bring the yarn forward and purl that purl stitch. It's kind of like when you're doing a little faux cable and crossing the stitches this way. Again, purl the next purl stitch because you want 2 purl stitches in a row. And then knit the next knit stitch, just regular. And again, you're in the same situation. You've got that stupid purl stitch in the way, so you just bypass them. Say, you're in the way, honey. And then just knit that knit stitch. And then purl the purl stitch that was in the way. Say, I finally got time for you. And things are going to be kind of loosey-goosey. You can pull them into place. And then purl the next purl stitch and knit the next knit stitch. Almost to the end. Knit that knit stitch with the purl stitch in the way. See? See, I can't pull it off because I've got that knit stitch waiting there, or that purl stitch rather waiting there. And then purl the purl stitch and drop both of them off the needle. Purl the last purl stitch, and this is the selvage stitch, so you can purl that one. And now, all you do is you're set up for a 2 by 2 rib. Knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, and then your selvage stitch. Whoop, my yarn did something funky. I don't even know what I did. Huh, well, I'm at the end anyway. My yarn messed up. One of the plies came off, and lovely. Okay, but see? I'm going to lay this down. And it looks really nice. And it's not a chunky, the way a cast-on piece usually looks. I really like that nice, smooth looking cast-on edge. Like I said, there is something that is comparable to this where you can bind off in the same way, where you cross stitches right before you bind off. I tried to do it the opposite way, to bind off, and it just didn't look the same. It looks stupid, and I'm doing something wrong with that technique. So I'm going to practice a little bit more on that, and I'll have that going. But I always avoided using a 2 by 2 rib at the beginning of a project where I needed ribbing, like starting at the bottom of a sweater or starting at the bottom of a mitten, or whatever it is. And it's really not that hard. It's a little trick to it, but I think it's worth it. And that's it. That's the end of my first knitting video in a while. I'm going to try to do more things on Twitter and Facebook, especially Twitter, now that I've discovered it. I thought of doing a little ask a question, like tweet a question and then get a tweeted answer back or something on Twitter. I'll announce that when I figure it out. Probably take me a while because I'm slow on Twitter. Took me 6 years to figure it out. But that's it. Thank you.